Hello, and welcome to another episode of Just Played, where I talk about tabletop RPGs I've recently participated in as either a player or a facilitator. I'm your host, Jim Crocker, and I've just played El Paso, and it's a supernatural western by Daniel Qualls. It's a Powered by the Apocalypse game hacked from the Between role-playing game, which is the same game that my hack that I'm working on called Escapes comes from. This particular game that I'm part of right now is a playtest campaign. We've got 4 scheduled sessions right now. The author is actually one of the players, and he is having another game master run it for us. We played online using Zoom and shared Google Docs, the playtest docs that we've got available to us right now, and this was organized via the Gauntlet Publishing Discord, who are the folks responsible for publishing the Between role-playing game. We played on April 6th, 2022. It was a Wednesday afternoon game, daytime game. Our GM, called the Keeper for this game, was David L. So let's talk about my character. I'm Caleb Zedrith, the Dapper Kid. I'm using the Two Gun Kid playbook. The Two Gun Kid is a young gunslinger who is canonically the relative, the younger sibling of one of the other player characters. So there's a connection right there that's built right in. Daniel, the designer of the game, is playing Oliver Lovejoy, the Charlatan playbook. Stephen is Kathy Baker, the Bootstrapper playbook. And Steph is Dr. Zed, which stands in for Zedrith because she's my sister, and she is playing the Vessel. This is our initial game, so we jumped right in with the world building and facing down our first threat. As with the Between, playing El Paso proceeds as characters investigate threats to the city, mostly ghostly and supernatural in this case, as they accumulate clues towards confronting the campaign's big bad, the Mastermind. At this point, we don't know much of anything about the Mastermind. That'll develop through play, so we were starting with a pretty clean slate this week in our very first game. So we opened with our first case, a mysterious stagecoach accident that required Dr. Zed's skills for an autopsy. Because Zed is the Vessel, which is a mortal husk that carries the embodied spirit of death itself, things went off the rails pretty quickly in that scene as the deputy who was there touched her bare skin just accidentally, kind of as a result of what they were doing, and started to convulse and choke because she's got a death touch. So anyone she touches with her bare skin, their death comes for them immediately. I was upstairs in my room reading one of my adventure novels. I went downstairs to see what the ruckus was about and ended up helping Zed save the deputy and wondering what the heck had just happened. Because death is only recently incarnated in the body of the Vessel, none of us know that she's not the same Zed we've known all along. So it was a little bit of a kind of funny mistaken identity thing that happened there between the two of us. That's going to be interesting to see how more of that plays out. Oliver is interested in tracking down the ghost we've heard rumors about being responsible possibly for this crash. And so he heads out of town to where the bodies that ended up in the mortuary were first found. Joined soon after by my character Caleb, who didn't want to watch his sister cut anyone up, not interested in seeing anything like that. So after poking around and uncovering a clue or two, we are confronted by the erstwhile owner of this property, a cantankerous and disheveled older woman who is so enraged by our presence that she demands satisfaction in the form of a duel with Caleb that evening. Now, Caleb is used to being called out, but not by people like this. So he tries to talk her down, but she screeches that she knows all about him and who he is and what he's done, and she can't be dissuaded, so he reluctantly agrees to meet her in town later that night. Kathy, the saloon owner, is concerned about this nasty ghost business being bad for trade, so she launches her own investigation with help from one of her shady friends. Her friend promises help if she can deliver information on Dr. Zed. As Zed has finished the autopsy and is now headed out of town to the location of the crashed carriage that she believed is related to the ghost sightings, Kathy is free to let herself into Zeb and Caleb's house, where she snoops around and finds Zed's journal, which contains macabre details of a terrible killing with hint of supernatural origins that seems to be something that happened before Zed got taken over by death and became the Vessel. Zed and Oliver, meanwhile, encounter the woman in white the ghost that seems responsible for all of this, and they manage to coax her into their carriage and have a brief conversation with her, which unfortunately ends up being inconclusive as some other creepy things happen that cause her to flee and leaving that unresolved. That night, the old woman makes good on her threat and shows up in the street where Caleb offers her one last chance to back down. She curses, raises her scattergun, and Caleb shoots down its barrel and blows it up in her face, leaving her a mangled mess. So he goes back inside the saloon to finish his sarsaparilla because he will never touch the demon alcohol, but has an eerie encounter with her corpse, who kind of crawls up in a bloody mess, grabs him by the pant leg, and she seems terrified and confused. She asks Caleb who he is, to which he replies in an echo of her challenge to him before, "You said you knew me, so I took you at your word." And that was kind of where the session ended up, with that sort of strange moment. For our closing situation at the end, we're all well on our way to answering the question that will allow us to resolve this threat. Right now, we've got 7 clues, and we'll probably need 3 or 4 more to answer the question associated with the lady in white. But of course, next session, we'll have another threat presented to us, so then we'll be juggling 2 and dealing with those at the same time. We had a post-game stinger scene where we met the mastermind for the first time. This is part of the sequence of events in a typical campaign of The Between and El Paso, and my own game, X-Capes, has something similar, where to sort of set the mastermind up the first time you meet them, after meeting them briefly in character, there's then sort of a post-credit stinger to sort of bring them into the campaign and give an idea of who they are. So we had that happen. There was an exquisitely dressed woman named Isabella and her partner, a sickly-looking man named Edward with something kind of wrapped around his neck, who hinted that they have plans for El Paso, big plans, but that the Vigilance Committee, that's us, would need to be dealt with first. So, a little hint of things to come. My favorite moment from a PC, lots of great moments. This is a really great crew that I'm playing with, and I'm immensely enjoying the game so far, even just with this one session that we've played. But in particular, I'm really loving how Steph is playing with having a character who's got a kind of amnesia that is intimate and social. So like, the vessel has all the skills and accumulated knowledge of place and people and culture and stuff that any other person that grew up in that society would. They just don't know the details of their own life and what's going on. It's a very interesting sort of thing. She called my character Sir at one point, which was a great touch, allowing me to sarcastically call my big sister Ma'am, because at this point, I think she's just acting weird. She's just being like, she's always been strange and morbid. So this is a little unusual, but I think we kind of established maybe sort of par for the course, and it's going to take a little while to figure out that there's something genuinely wrong. It can be tricky to play a character who doesn't know anyone, but because the Betweens structure, which this game has inherited, is set up so that we learn about the PCs via play through flashbacks. You don't do a big pile of backstory when you first come into the game. You reveal it as you play. That really works well here, in large part because Steph isn't overdoing it, which is a trap you could fall into with this character. And she's doing copious check-ins at the player level to make sure that her character level secret is fully talked out for shared drama, and that we're all in on what's going on and what she's doing, and making sure that it's not too much and that we still have something to work with there. So she's just doing a great job with that. And in particular, that scene I had with her where we're kind of negotiating the boundaries of our brother-sister relationship was really cool, and I'm looking forward to a whole lot more of that. My favorite moment from the GM, our GM David is a longtime indie game veteran who used to co-host a Dungeon World podcast. So he's got the PBTA engine down cold. He doesn't need any help with kind of the backbone of the game. He is doing a great job so far of making things creepy and supernatural, but without forgetting about the practical realities of our Western frontier situation. In particular, his portrayal in this session of the Lady in White as more confused and angry than particularly malevolent was really affecting. And that will play a major role in how we decide to deal with her, because her personality is going to affect what we think happened to her and how we treat her and what it is we do to deal with that threat. And he played that really nicely in this session. I'm really interested in seeing where we go with that. So something I noticed about the game is I've got this particular interest in this game for several reasons. First and foremost, of course, is that I'm working on my own hack of the Between with X Capes, which is this modern superhero noir thing that I'm doing. It doesn't hurt that I am also a big fan of the Weird West genre, so this was just a great fit for me all around. After our initial playthrough, I'm intrigued that out of the 7 clues we discover, I didn't uncover a single one. My PC did not discover any of those clues, but I still felt deeply involved and engaged in the game. I'm pretty certain that that's a really clever function of the fact that we start with only the faintest outline of our respective PC backgrounds revealed. That's something that I talked about before. The rest comes out through play as we ask each other questions and share intimate moments and use the masks that require us to narrate flashbacks to alter our roles. Each of us gets a certain number of masks that we can put on sort of metaphorically that require a flashback, and you can use those to bump a failed roll to help you in any given situation. The job for the keeper here is to make sure that those reveals stay integrated with the ongoing game, as opposed to letting them spin off to become the point of the campaign, or even just a single character who goes down a rabbit hole of their background while sort of ignoring the events of the campaign that are going on. This approach embodies the modern genre fiction notion that you should reveal character via action, that your gunfights and your bar brawls should always tell us something about the people involved. My modest involvement this session was almost certainly a function of it being our first, which means that we only had one threat on the table. So once we've got a few sessions in and the threats start to pile up, you can technically, I think you can have up to 3 in play at any one time, and maybe even an extra 1 or 2, depending on how threats get on. Some of the unlockable threats get brought into play. I suspect we'll all have our hands so full with multiple investigations that any temptation to set it aside for navel gazing will be totally off the table, which is very much the game working as designed as far as I can see. But I'll report back after a future session to let you all know if I've got that right. But I think it is. So I'm looking forward to more of this game. So you can follow me on Twitter at Jim Likes Games, which is also the name of my YouTube channel, where I've compiled hundreds of hours of actual play tabletop RPG videos. You can purchase game stuff I've written at my itch.io page and on DriveThruRPG under Jim Likes Games, and look for me at conventions working with my friends at Indie Press Revolution and Games on Demand. Finally, listen for me on other shows in the Curmudgeons and Dragons family of gaming podcasts. If you like what I'm doing here, please rate and review the show and tell your other gamer friends about it. This episode was written and voiced by me, Jim Crocker, and produced by Jason Portizo. That's it for this week, so if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go play another game.
Thank you for listening to Curmudgeons and Dragons. Please share this with your favorite adventurers. Leave a review on Apple and follow us on social media. All links can be found at curmudgeonsanddragons.com. Practice safe adventuring, my friends.
This has been a JTP Audio podcast. Thanks for listening.